I'm really excited to get this panel underway. As we've seen already at JP Morgan, so many deals going on. And so today our topic will be partnering. We'll focus on how, first of all, why a small biotech would want to partner, how you would go about effectively managing partnerships or seeking partners, distinguishing yourself from the sea of other biotechs with the, I think I'm going to quote Armand here, the best thing since sliced bread. Balancing your independence with your partnership, kind of when you think the right time is to partner, or maybe there's not an answer to that question. And finally, the advice that our panel has for other biotechs who are looking to partner. So I'm going to put Armand on the spot again. As Squeeze, a platform company that you've said from the get-go you've been looking to partner, why was this your strategy? Like, why do you partner?
Well, for us as a platform, because there was truly many things we could do in cell therapy, where because we had overcome a lot of the issues as far as what you can engineer about cells and how you can ultimately create safer, more effective, more manufacturable cell therapies, this could be applied to many different areas. And so partnering for us as a young biotech was really attractive because thinking about the multiplicity of things, a partner could certainly bring a certain level of additional expertise and validation to what you're trying to do and really anchor some programs while you also develop your own programs in parallel to that. And so for us, especially doing innovative, very different things in cell therapy, it very much helped to have someone like Roche come in and partner at the stage that they did.
And I wonder if the other panelists have thoughts kind of partnering, as you said, as an early biotech. I wonder if any of the other panelists have your own experience or your own thoughts on how important it is to partner early, or conversely, if you would prefer to partner at a later stage.
So I've started 3 companies, and the current one is Cerevance, but the last 2 as well were all platform companies for research discovery. So some of us are going to talk about partnering assets and licensing and in-licensing, which I've done, but most of mine were situations where your VCs or your investors want to see pretty early on that your platform that you've been bragging about actually has some value. So validating you that way by doing a partnership is important. Bringing in non-dilutive cash instead of equity money is always attractive if you can. But I think the number one reason is probably if you have a platform that's applicable broadly, you really don't want to limit it to the few things a biotech can pursue as a startup, but you'd like to partner with people who can use the platform in other ways. So in our case right now with the CNS drug discovery or target discovery platform, there are different pharmas that have strategic interests in different neurological diseases, and you can do a lot more really quickly with a partner.
And when you're structuring this type of partnership as a platform company, sometimes a pharma partner will come in and they'll kind of partner on, say, your biggest asset, like your most exciting thing. So how do you then, balance this validation with this partnership with kind of creating value for your own company? Anyone?
Well, I think that partnership needs to be part of your strategy from the get-go. I mean, you need to decide what you're going to do, what you want to do, how do you build value. At the end of the day, partnership is not an end in itself. It's just the beginning of a process. It's if you need validation, that's a good reason to do one. If you need cash, that's another good reason to do one. If you need resources, expanding your reach, that's another good reason. But you shouldn't try to do one and have in mind something else, because otherwise you get really in trouble with partners.
So do we then, from the get-go, have a strategy, big picture? How would you kind of structure your trajectory to be able to fulfill your big picture objectives when I think the experience of biotech has been kind of pretty step by step when you think about different fundraising rounds, though I think we are seeing a bit of a change in that recently. So to go back to the question, it's how do you keep that kind of end goal in mind while taking partnering steps or other steps along the way?
I'll jump in.
Sure.
We probably maybe are on the other end of a platform company. When we founded our company, we in-licensed very early, preclinical compounds that modulated specifically inflammatory pathways. And so we moved rapidly into the clinic and really had a long-term strategy of making the transition to a fully commercial, biopharmaceutical company, very therapeutically focused. And as a consequence, with that strategy in mind, we really avoided partnering early. We raised our capital through equity financing. And then we did very specific regional deals where we could use help commercializing or developing around the world while retaining most of the US rights.
Right, so, yeah, go
So
ahead.
I was just going to add, like, the point you made about partnering your lead program, which is generally what will happen and what the partner is interested in. I think it ends up requiring you to really take a leap of faith on yourself and your platform, because that's also the most certain thing you have. So by partnering it off, for the longer run, people are not going to value it as much anymore. And so you need to actually believe your platform is going to yield those next things. And by kind of partnering your first child, let's call it, you're going to have many others that can then build the company in the long run. So that's a leap you need to be willing to take, which can sometimes be nerve-wracking when that time actually comes.
I think there is a big difference between platform companies who are basically set up to partner. We have been focused on ophthalmology since the get-go, and we have brought one product to the market from the bench all the way to the market. And we kind of kept the risk, but also built the value. So early partnering is not really in our genes. We try to keep it as long as possible. Of course, we never had any VC on board. I think that helps with regard to making such decisions. We did partner when the drug basically was approved. And then that's of course when you keep the risk, but the reward is of course higher. But just to mention that, we are therapeutically focused like Warren. Then it's more a question, I think, of late stage partnering, whereas platform, you probably want to go early.
Yeah, I actually would like to just echo that, because we actually matched our financing plan with the partnering plan. So like you, we didn't access traditional East or West Coast biotech venture capital. We were able to access true large evergreen sources of capital that allowed us to not have to produce returns in the first 24 to 36 months and to plan longer. And that allowed us to keep the rights longer. So.
There is a clear difference in the partnering strategy if you look at it from the big pharma side. If you are dealing with very early asset technology platform, assets which are pre-entry into man, you end up in the organization mainly in the research team and in the research portfolio. So it all depends what you want to achieve with your technology. If you are looking at a technology which have multiple applications and so on, it's in your best interest to have multiple partners validating your technology. But it's not very popular when you start slicing and dicing a good technology, because people would like to have full access or exclusivity on your technology. So when you partner early, the exclusivity component matter. If you have a product, the interest of partnering your product early is the acceleration and the quality of the package you will get. But the price is you might lose control over your product. And this is where a small biotech, that's I think the most important asset for you, but when it lands in a portfolio or large pharmaceutical company, you may not fully control what's happening there. And it's quite important to know what you want to do. Do you want to give it away? And I look at partnering like marital relationship. You get a picture and a check at the end of the year, and you see how the baby has developed, or you raise the baby together. And on that front, you better be very, very clear before you embark into your partnering discussion. What do you want? And more important, do you have the capabilities, the resources to be able to develop your product in a true partnership? Because if you don't, even if in your contract it's in there, you most likely end up losing control over your asset.
Yeah, those are a lot of topics that I have on the slate today. So thank you for raising up. First of all, the marital comparison is something that a lot of people talk about. start building your relationship before you're even in the alliance. I think I was talking to James Saber yesterday, and Roche does so much partnering, and it's if your negotiation is going to be fundamentally different from what the partnership is actually going to be, is it even worth partnering? Is that question. So thank you, Fouzia. When we talked about knowing from the get-go, how do we, as biotech leaders, CEOs, make sure both sides are on the same page? I know some of you have had different partnerships and different experiences. How do you make sure that the communication is clear and is understood by both sides?
I think that's particularly difficult to do, to be frank, and because both sides come from different perspectives to that partnership. And in particular, like in our experience, we've done some partnership with Asian companies. There comes the language difference, the cultural difference, and what you think you agree upon sometimes is not always agreed upon by both parties. I'm not blaming one or the other. It's just the fact that the communication is different. The standards are different. And even if you have a very, very good partner, you end up in difficult situations if the transparency, the openness, the objective of the partnership is not set up really, really well from the get-go, I think.
I think besides culture, if your collaboration or partnership is going to last more than a few years or even a couple of years, the odds of the people across the table from you being the same is going to be pretty low with all the tremendous turnover. Unless you have several partnerships, in which case sometimes one of the people will move to another one and you'll see them again. But you have to plan for that. I had a partnership a while ago that I formed, and having been burned and having lots of experience, I thought I was being really smart by hardwiring in the contract that the global pharma partnering with us would be really diligent and would always have resources allocated to this and would give it top priority, and went on and on for like a page and a half in the contract. And it was a multi-year collaboration, research collaboration, but 6 months in, the big boss asked me to fly in so they could break the news to me that they'd still pay us money, but could they put everything on hold for a year? So, and then of course half the people you were negotiating with start contacting you on LinkedIn because they're polishing their network because they're all going to leave. So that's just the reality of our industry, that there's a lot of things. But I think if you plan as best you can, and I think at a high level know what your intentions are, you can usually have a good collaboration.
And I think that's where you need to really spend a lot of effort forging connections across levels and divisions within the partnered company, where kind of at the higher levels you have a relationship, or you have a relationship with the partnering side and the research side, and your team has a relationship with their team. So as people turn over, you have enough redundancy to the system to hopefully keep this alive, because if your former champion's not fighting for it anymore, the people around them are. And sometimes things can change for the better, where they'll be on the ascent in their organization, so it might actually even enhance the partnership. So I think that redundancy really helps, and that's just a lot of kind of day-to-day effort to make sure you do this.
It's amazing how much the marriage metaphor fits of this. Yesterday, I was in one meeting where out of my mouth came the words, "We've been dating a long time here. Can we at least get to the point where I meet your parents?" And then with another one, I said, we explained what we see in a marriage and a partnership, and it sounded very aligned, except that then they revealed that they want the freedom to have other spouses, and you have to. I'm not sure about that, So.
Want an open marriage.
The idea of having multiple contact in large organizations is not always appreciated at the receiving end. And you will see most of the large organizations have worked extensively in building their alliance management group. And as a biotech, they have several biotech they have to interact with. So you will get a dedicated alliance managers to manage your relationship. That's the main vehicle into the organization. So make sure that that relationship is very strong, and that in particular, your alliance managers is your eyes and your ears in the company, and is bringing back the information to you as well. If that relationship is not very efficient or very effective, or you are the number 10 alliance he's managing and you're not his priority, don't be disappointed that things are not moving the way you want. Protection via the contract is important, despite that it's not always followed through, but is important, and have the courage to have the tough discussion before your contract is signed, because very often people leave sensitive point. We'll figure that one later. We don't have time now. We need to get the deal done. And these are the things which are going to come back and haunt you. And there are some, I would say, usual issues you see. The decision right, the escalation process. Get a sense in your contract about the budget which is going to be allocated. Get a sense about the timeline you want this project to move on. And don't be afraid of having that outlined in the contract. It requires work on your side as well, because if you say this compound needs to be put, and we expect phase 1 entry within this calendar, it's in your contract, you will have a better point to discuss. If you say we'll figure that one down the road, you're not. Same thing, if you have a late-stage asset, having an understanding, common understanding of the potential forecast for this product is important, because otherwise your value and their value are going to be different. The regulatory path, you cannot go to the nitty-gritty, but at least having a common understanding of the principle will get you a long way, and make sure that the decision right, you can live with it. If they have the final say, or if you absolutely want the final say, then you better get it, because otherwise it's not going to work. It's like before you get married, make sure that during the dating period, the partners agree on the condition of under which you are going to live, and raise kids, which is even more important.
So on the contract, the hardwiring, we licensed to a big Swiss company a late-stage product a few years ago, and we thought to have it nailed down in a 160-page contract. And the experience is that while the partnership runs, nobody really knows what's in the contract, and nobody cares what's in the contract. So it's at the end of the marriage that you pull out the contract and that you say who's going to be paying whom. But our experience was that, while it lasted about 5 years, the contract, yeah, I mean, everybody knew it was there, but, it's like you can refer to it, but the reaction to it was something different. So implementing a contract, in our experience, was during the partnership difficult. At the end, it was helpful.
I'd just add, these are, I think, all great comments, the contracts, aligning with the people, good communication. And the only thing I would add is just that also, to the extent that you can, it's important to just from the outside try to really understand your partner's strategic direction. So, whether it's a technology or whether it's a therapeutic area, it's just important to go into the partnership with a partner that you think really is committed over the long haul, at least to your style of technology or to the therapeutic area that you're addressing. If they're a new entry, or not committed, you may be setting yourself up for a partner that's disinterested along the way.
And as a biotech company, usually a small biotech company, getting a contract seems to be like getting a partner seems to be like something that everybody strives to. And so you're making concessions at the beginning because you want to do this. Remember that the other side also wants to do this partnership. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting with you on the table. They have the same interest in doing that partnership. So you're actually talking on equal footing. They have an interest, you have an interest, and it's not because they're worth 20, 30, 40 billion and you're worth a few hundred millions that discussion is not on par. You have to have strong discussions and strong you have to say what you want of that partnership. They will say what they want. You have to say what you want, and make sure that those two are very aligned. Again, otherwise, you're headed for difficult times.
And so we've talked a lot about kind of the contract, making sure you have all the things that you require to make this a successful partnership for you. So I'm now interested in, once, or maybe not even once that's all done, because I can't remember which one of you previously told me this, but it's important if you're working on an R&D partnership early stage to really make sure that once it's all signed, that the research teams can just go. I think what we mentioned was not to kind of build firewalls between the different research teams and partners, so they don't always have to come running back to you and say, hey, can we show the other side this? So I can't remember who said this, but yeah. Do you want to expand on this? Like, how can you kind of build this into, say, your relationship and or into your contract to make sure this is successful?
Well, for starters, a lot of times the two scientific teams, hopefully with champions who are pretty senior, are all stoked and excited about the research, but they don't work too hard on getting into the specifics. And too soon they hand it over to BD people or lawyers to work out all the mechanisms. And they spent a little more time understanding how things will work and envisioning it, it'd be great. So getting really into the details. But yeah, again and again, people get surprised once the research collaboration's underway and they find out that there are things they can't do because of the way the thing was structured. You can put a lot of pressure on your deal makers in the beginning to make it clear that you want to act like you're one company. This is on a research collaboration, but the more you can be like one company working together, for example, if you're generating data that you can really open up and mine everything together, that's going to be a lot better going forward. And also sometimes it produces additional opportunities. So you'll end up, I've had experiences where you expand the collaboration because of new data that comes out. And if you made it too rigid up front, you won't be able to do that. So.
Yeah, and I think some of that goes back to your point that no one remembers what the contract said once things get going. I mean, it sets some initial expectations, and you might look at it again if you're getting divorced, but in between, no one pays attention to it. And so things can very easily evolve into their own format that works. So that goes to that kind of ongoing effort of just creating the relationship that you want this to be and having that format be the productive thing, even though it's not verbatim what was necessarily in the contract, because you both kind of realize that it's better to just do it this way. And no one cared that it's deviating and you're doing monthly meetings instead of quarterly, or there's 3 extra people at this meeting, or this guy doesn't feel like going anymore. It all ends up working out. And I think one advantage that, especially on the research side, the small biotechs can have is that while sometimes the big pharma can feel like the soulless behemoth, you're actually probably one of the fun parts of their day, because they're used to all the bureaucracy and stuff, but then you're doing the cutting edge stuff. That's why they partnered. So that's something you can really make use of, because if you play your cards right, they want to be paying a lot of attention and doing the right stuff for this, because this is kind of the fun part. They're in a bunch of committees the rest of the day, but this is the exciting thing. So I think you have a lot of ways to try to shape things in the way you would want by working with them.
If you look at the successful collaboration between biotech and pharma, if you go back to the dynamic when you work together, it is all about the expectation and what each party brings to the table. Having a joint team and having the team driving the process, the project is much more efficient than the bureaucracy. But the reality is the challenge the biotech are faced with that is they are underpowered in terms of resources. So when you have a joint team in early R&D, you will have for the same function 5 or 6 people on the pharma side, and you'll have 1 or 2 person on the biotech side covering the same thing. So this is where the expectations have to be clear when you put the governance model on how this joint team is going to work together and be realistic. Working together is great, but they will burn out your resources just because of the number of meetings and so on, and the science start to slip behind. So you have to be careful that when you put the governance and the structure of the joint team and also the committees and these meetings, which I think don't need to be rigid, but they are necessary to know how you operate, you have to be realistic of what you bring to the table, what you want to get out of it, what they bring to the table, and not duplicate, because very often There is the biotech wanting to do it and the pharma wanting to do it, and there is some overlap and duplications.
Yeah, and I'm interested in, we've been talking about your partner, and I'm interested in whether different companies may want to partner with multiple other companies. And we talked a little bit about being very early stage. It might look as if you're already, to follow the marriage metaphor, already taken. And so maybe other partners you may want to pursue feel like you're off limits, like you're the kind of the pet of the one pharma company that's your partner. So I wonder if this, the answer for this is different for, say, a company that has like 1 or 2 or 3 assets, or a company that is a platform company, whether you want to partner with multiple partners, and then how then do you manage the relationship while pursuing others, how you juggle the partnerships and so on. It's a big question. I can see the wheels turning.
Well, again, there you have a big difference between the platform companies that de facto have to have multiple partners. The therapeutically focused companies, they will typically have a more limited amount of number of partners. So one thing, if you're a single asset company, and you have a partnership there, then you get into very complex waters, of course, because then your future is clear. And your leverage with other companies has gone. The best way is always that you have competing partners. That you keep informed. When you make the deal, in the end, you have that in hand. But keeping everybody informed in the field on what you're doing, so the dating part, long dating is actually a good thing. I mean, they don't go away. Most of the time, you get more attractive for whatever reason. So date long, keep competition going, and make the deal when it makes strategically sense. I personally think the worst decision to make a deal is actually to get cash. Because if a partner wants to give cash, most likely you can get the cash on the market as well. So, I'm in favor of dating multiple partners.
He's going to get to open marriages soon, but we'll not go there. No, but if you look at external innovation, which is what biotech is bringing to the big players, on external innovation, you most likely would like to have multiple shots on goals because you don't know which one will deliver if you look within a therapy area. And as a biotech, as much as you probably want to have different partners, do you have the time, resources, capacity to manage this multiple partnership? Because they are very time-consuming, very effort-consuming. So do you want to slice and dice your opportunity and give pieces to different people? Or you select what you call your strategic partner, who is going to accelerate whatever you do. And if you are in exclusivity with them, you will not have to worry about being distracted with other partners which may not bring you the same value. So it all depends. If you have one technology platform, it has broad indication. Do you do it by therapy area? You give a different therapy area to everyone. If you have a single asset, then the story is pretty clear. You will most likely, large pharma would like to have the totality of the asset for a very obvious reason.
But on that last point, the asset that you have, if it has multiple indication, not a platform, but an asset that can apply to multiple indication, you may have one partner that is very good at a particular, for example, hematological malignancy, another one that is good at solid tumors, and they wouldn't want to have competing against each other. So you're in a difficult situation when you have that sort of situation. You have an asset that could work, for example, in blood cancers. You have an asset, the same asset that could work for solid tumors. It's not the same partners.
And I think some other factors you want to think about is, as you know, when it comes to thinking about doubling down with the same partner versus having a new one, you know what this one is like. So do you go with the devil you know or the one you don't? Because while on paper one may be better than the other, and it might say go for the new one, you never know what you might be getting yourself into, but doubling down with the same one might help. And they do get territorial, so that's kind of another thing. You don't want to break the first partnership because you did the second partnership sometimes. And I think another consideration for biotechs, if you want to remain independent, is that it can be tricky to be like one pharma's pet, because then the urge might be for them to try to take you over down the line. But if you have multiple pharmas involved, then it makes it harder for them to do that, because they will clash or compete and not want that to happen. And so that can help keep the company more likely to be independent in the long run if you're not seen as just one group's pet.
If you go back to the point of the split of the same asset by indication or by therapy area, or you see some deals done by geographic area, which is you give the European right, you give you Asian right, you keep the North American right with the hand of another player. All of that bring you what I would call short-term solution, but in the long run, it make the partnership more challenging. While you are in development phase and so on, it's fine. It becomes more challenging when you start to reach registration. You know, your safety data collection done by different parties. Not talking about your commercialization, your manufacturing and supply,
pricing.
Your pricing, if you have different indication, the first indication to launch and the price. So think that carefully through before you slice and dice, because it might be a short win, it might be a long-term loss. Because some people will walk away, even if the asset is very interesting to them, just because it's in the hand of one of their competitors in that geographic area or in that indication. So back to your example of hematology and solid tumors, you have to decide where your priority is and pick up the priority. If you think the asset has more value in hematology, then you probably want a big player in the hematology field, and you will figure out how you manage solid tumor afterwards. But if you try to dissect both at the beginning, I think your likelihood of success might be a little bit
No,
lower.
but for example, if to the example you're giving, Fouzia, if you're licensing out I agree that your pharma partners will want total access and total control of your product, because even if they're just in hematology, they do not want to fall in the situation you're talking about. But then a lot of the value of what you're developing, you're not going to get, because you won't be able to give it to someone that is there, right?
Yeah, I'm going to add to that. So we did our first partnering deal for a late-stage therapeutic, and we did a Japan, Southeast Asia deal with a great partner, had really fabulous therapeutic area experience, and they've been a tremendous help to us, co-developing in certain parts of the world, preparing for commercialization. That allowed us to keep the entire rest of world rights. You know, so we're a company with multiple pivotal studies with retaining full 100% of the US economics. And so yes, I agree with everything you said, because we've experienced it. The difficulty of having two partners, safety data, all those things are absolutely true. You have to balance it against, though it may allow you to keep a bigger piece of your asset later, or keep the crown jewel of the economics by splitting off those pieces, and you just have to make that judgment, right? Yeah. So.
And I don't know if there's like a how-to guide of how to do that judgment. I guess that's why we're all here, right?
Yeah. Anybody can do it. It's easy.
Yeah. Yeah, and moving on, I'm thinking about the question of when is the right time to partner. We've talked a lot about kind of early stage partners and validation, kind of having that boost to take your platform forward, and then you can kind of apply that to other areas. And I'm interested in, and there's a lot of different perspectives on this. Some people don't even think about it as early versus late. It's kind of whether at the time of the partnership, whether it brings the partner brings you value, or you would bring more value just like without them to begin with. So I know that DalCor is starting from kind of a different stage in the life cycle with your assets. So do you want to talk a little bit about how DalCor is partnering?
Sure. I mean, for the one who are not very familiar with DalCor, it's a company which was created 3-4 years ago. It's a single asset, late stage, phase 3 opportunity for cardiovascular precision medicine. So it's not, I would say, the usual environment you might be operating in a biotech. The compound came from Roche, failed in phase 3, and DalCor is doing another outcome study, which we actually fully recruited last month, in a genetically predefined population, which has a potentially better response. So that's what we are doing. Very clearly, in the cardiovascular metabolism field, the commercialization will require potential partner. So we'll be talking to partners very early in this process, because the commercialization to be done by biotech of the size of DalCor might be a challenge. Of course, we'll keep our options open, but if you are a late phase 3 asset in a large market, if you want to maximize the value of your asset, you probably want to do that through partnership. So you'll be looking at the partners which have a good track record in launching a product in the CV field, and who appreciate also what a precision medicine will be. We're working hand in hand with Roche Diagnostic, which is an important component. If you are a biotech and you need a diagnostic attached to your product, you have to involve that diagnostic partner early on in order to be able to file your diagnostic test as a partner, as a companion diagnostic. So from day one, DalCor have entered the agreement with Roche Molecular Diagnostic to develop the test together, put it in the trial, and hopefully, if the trial is successful, we'll file jointly with Roche Molecular System. So that's the philosophy of our partnering. Then the big questions is before or after data. If anyone has any suggestion, we are open. It's again a judgment call. If you truly believe in what you do, post-data is where you will get the maximum value. If you want to share your risk, your R&D risk beforehand, then you do it before data. There is also one final component which may lead you to do something before data, is the market preparation. And if you have a technology or an asset which is going to be disruptive, like the one DalCor has, because it will be the first compound in cardiovascular launch with a genetic test attached to it. It has been done very successfully in oncology and respiratory, but this will be the first one in cardiovascular, so it might be kind of disruptive. It requires a lot of market education, scientific education, payers education. So to do all of that, biotech of our size is going to be a lot heavy lifting. Doing that with the partners, if the partners are interested to come on board earlier, will accelerate your uptake when you launch. So it's all this component, and as you know, the uptake is what drives your peak year sales at the end. So this is the kind of debate and strategic decision we have to make as an organization with the board, because that's important as well. The board have to buy into the partnering strategy. So at DalCor, we are definitely considering partnership. Timeline of that, conditions of that are, of course, to be further discussed.
But in this instance, are you? Is it a partnership or an acquisition you're talking about? I mean, this is.
That's another good question.
Right. If you have a single asset, then.
It is very clear if you have a single asset company, in particular late stage. Having sit on the other side of the table, most of the BD person will be recommending to consider an acquisition, because you don't want to have string and so on. So it all depends also of what you want to do. This is where try to keep the decision in your hand. So if you want to have an exit on an acquisition, then you say that upfront to your partner. If you're open to both, you say I'm open to both. But decide what you want and go and get it. That's the philosophy. But very clearly, if you are a single asset or a single technology and you are going to be successful, I would say, friendly or aggressive M&A is on your way. Because even if you don't want an M&A, you may end up having an aggressive M&A. So we have to be prepared for it.
Doesn't whether you sell or partner before data, isn't that influenced by whether you're a single asset, binary company, or you have other things behind it? So if in your case, if you've got nothing behind it and you wait till after the data, there's a zero is what one of the scenarios is worth, right? So
yeah, we are not nothing behind it. As you know, biotech surf on IP, and if this hypothesis delivers, we're of course building the IP behind it. So there is one big asset, late stage phase 3, but
there's more.
We'll be looking at more, of course.
So when we made the deal, we started as a multiple asset company and then ended up with one single asset company with, let's say, positive phase 3 data in hand. And everybody thought the big partner will eat them up. No, the big partner made a deal, and the big partner launched a product, and the big partner waited to see what the drug was doing in the market. So I think, it's not because you're a single asset company that they're going to jump on it and eating it up. I think those times seem to be over. It is more they want to make a correct deal. And then when let's say, it really takes off, then they're willing to put the money on the table. That's our experience. With regard to the timing of a deal, I think most small biotechs are able to kind of find funding up to phase 2. And clinical proof of concept is really what you want to have in hand because it's the highest point of value creation. Then you get to the phase 3. And in most indications, phase 3 is, big money. And for the big money, then it's at that stage, I think that most of the time partnership is being considered. Can we fund that $100 million trial or not? So I think that's it may be a generality, but that's in general the time end of phase 2 when most companies, I think, look very carefully, are we going to partner or not?
I would risk being a little contrarian on the timing, where if you think you have a platform that can truly enable a lot of different products, I would say as for one of those products as early as possible is probably best, because the validation that brings and the momentum it puts behind the platform as a whole is invaluable, because there people are reading into this as, okay, this partner thought this was a good idea, therefore the rest of the things that these people talk about must be at least interesting, or there's some weight behind it. And so that can be useful despite it being in many ways potentially financially suboptimal to have partnered it at that stage. So I think it has a big momentum benefit if you're a really early stage platform. But then after that, I would agree. Like once you have that, it becomes better to do it later and later.
Yeah, for platform companies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think also not just the momentum and the the validation that you talk about, but the work that's done using your platform on like this one area can it helps develop the platform. It can lead to kind of more momentum in other areas, which is of course a win for a platform company.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about when to partner. I'm now interested in when do we not partner? Like we've talked a lot about these things, but kind of when do you, partnering you look at it and you say, oh, it's not an option right now. Why do we not think about this? Or maybe you go into kind of partnership discussions and you say, you know what, I'm walking away.
Well, there can be situations where the partner is asking for something that's tantamount to buying you. So you may say, you may not say, but what you're thinking is, if you want all that, then you might as well buy us, and they're trying not to. So, where you're restricted from doing other things, or I was on the board of a company recently where they were offered what would have been an amazing press release, enormous upfront payment, but almost all of the upfront payment went for funding the project with that pharma, and then the pharma had the right to all kinds of call options to take everything afterwards. So, although I really wanted to see that press release, we all did, in reality, the company kind of would have owned the smaller company without buying it. So those kinds of things happen, and you have to take kind of a bold board and management to say, we really are seduced, but we're not going to do it.
Sounds like several of us would, everybody's nodding. The one piece of advice I would give is if you're a therapeutic development company and you've got a asset that's significantly in front of everything else, or you're relatively, and it's still relatively early stage, I just wouldn't partner it. You're just giving up your future. And they tend to get, as you said, the deal tends to just fund the development, and you've given up a huge amount of the upside. And that's just not the game I think any of us in the room are playing for. We're all taking risks, trying to innovate. You know, selling your crown jewel early, just you're done.
Yeah, and I think with some of these deals, because there's sometimes multiple assets that might be neighboring the one that you're partnering, you got to, I think, make sure that you're being very clean cut about excluding those neighboring things, because it's something that the partner will probably, for safety, just try to reach and have a buffer zone around it, but you probably value what lives in that buffer zone a lot more than they do, and so that could be really inefficient to do. So kind of more narrowly it's defined, the better when it does make sense to partner it, because they will often try to have a big safety margin around it.
When you make a decision to partner, I think it's important to have more than one party at the table. It's extreme. I think Patrick experienced this with his own partnering long ago. But remember, this is your asset, and you have a choice. You have a choice to do a deal. You have a choice not to do a deal. You do not. And I agree. The big partners will try to get everything. They'll try to get the rights, not pay for them, or pay as little as possible. And I think you know, you just need to remember that you have something that they want.
So the one thing I've concluded today is that my next negotiation, I want you to come alongside me. You're really good at pumping me up to ask for more and not be weak, and especially when you're in another new company, your first deal's notoriously always your worst deal. So you got to come along. You got to come along.
You know, going back to when not to partner, it's if you do have a swing factors coming your way, which you believe have significant upside, versus the value potential partner are putting either on your platform or on your asset. I think it's back to judgment call, how strongly you believe that that swing factor is going to significantly impact the valuation of what you're doing. And if you have the financing and everything in place to pass that swing factor, and if you can afford to play the beauty contest, because if you decide not to partner, if you are in a unique space and you are the front runners and so on, people will continue knocking on your door. But keep in mind that if you don't enter into the dialogue of partnering discussions, they may walk away and go and partner the one next on the line, because that's one they're going to secure. So this is a lot of parameters you have to take into account, which is where are you positioned versus your competitors, meaning other biotechs, how you value your asset or your technology versus how the partners value it, and which data point. I mean, we all do the same analysis. We look at the data point and say, if I get it at this point, it's much cheaper, because if this turns out to be positive, this is what I will have to put on the table to get access to it. So if you think that that data point is going to be positive and you can afford to hold, then hold. Otherwise, at least I would encourage you to keep always the dialogue open. Because if they're going to make a move on another asset and yours is more attractive, they will come back and talk to you before the move on the others. So keep the dialogue open. If you close the door, then they may not knock again.
And I wanted to go back to the thing that Armand said about having the partnership area to be clearly demarcated and not let it spill over into the areas that, as you said, are more important to you than they are to the partner. And I know you recently expanded your partnership, so I'm wondering, with Roche, so I'm wondering, you know, do you aim to expand a partnership with a partner? I think it was about three years or so. 3 years ago was the first
yeah.
Is this a good thing? Do you aim for it? And what does this mean kind of for the rest of your activities if you do expand the partnership?
I wouldn't give us credit for having that good of a crystal ball as to what was going to happen, but I think when you're going into new scientific territories like we are, you just don't really know what's going to live in that other zone, and neither does the partner. And so in that sense, it's best to try to make sure you keep it as tightly ring-fenced around the concept at hand, because there might be 5 ideas you have that live in that periphery, and you don't want to have pre-sold it without it ever having gotten appropriately valued. And kind of going back to the utilities of an early partnering deal, the downside is you don't want it to spill into other things, because you want to have partnered one thing, so you have 5 things for yourself down the line. So I think when you play in that buffer zone, it might be likely that it'll end up becoming an expansion, because it might relate enough to what was originally partnered, and you might both want to do this. So in our case, the mechanism of what we were after with Roche that we started 3 years ago, and the mechanism of what we ended up developing ourselves that was not subject to it was very much related. And so it made a lot of scientific sense to just combine them to create the best product possible, and both of us wanted to do that. But I think it's more abstract to, especially if you're in new scientific territory. You don't know what lives there. You might have some ideas, so just make sure you don't pre-sell those future products, because they're also not going to get valued. And in many ways, the partner doesn't necessarily care, because they don't spend time thinking about that periphery through the lens that you might think about it. So you can probably get that tight, because their concerns are probably not the same as yours in those regards.
Yeah, and we're thinking kind of more down the advice line. So we talked about, you look at your contract again when you get divorced. There are things that you cannot plan for, where all these people are messaging you on LinkedIn. I didn't know that was something people did when they're about to break up with you. But I want to kind of put Warren on the spot for this one. I think we talked about preparing for the breakup kind of to the best of your ability, as Brad mentioned earlier.
Yeah, when you asked me, my one bit of advice to everybody was just plan for the end up front. So, when you're getting close to, to signing the deal, and when you kind of design what rights you're giving up and everything, I think it's just really important to pressure test what does the worst case scenario look like, right? What if my partner gets acquired by another company next week? What if we have an initial failure? What, really what happens? And so to just really carefully literally do the thinking slow part of, how am I going to have to operate under this contract? And so, key decisions about like how much development control you give up and what territories you've given up and all of that. I think, you just need to, really think about what does this look like if it just doesn't go well.
So we divorced twice. We have some experience. What actually made us most money is a thing called commercial diligence. If you write a contract as a biotech and you get to the commercial stuff, typically is the best commercial efforts phrase. And even though you have an early asset, you kind of take that as best commercial effort. And that is a major point of discussion, of course, when you get to that divorce. The most important thing for us has been the commercial diligence. That per country, you just insist how many reps, how much time, and how much money. Because if that, at the end of the day, was not implemented, that's all cash on the bank. So the most important thing to avoid is the single phrase, best commercial effort. Practical advice, practical divorce advice.
Be specific.
Sorry?
To be specific.
To be very specific, even if you have an early project, make that commercial thing as specific as possible.
Yeah, go ahead.
For the R&D is what is translated to the best effort clause in the contract. And back to your point, it's again having the difficult discussion up front, which will make your life easier. Very often, asset might be returned to a biotech because of a difference of opinion. You agree on a target product profile, the phase 2A or the phase 1 don't deliver. From your perspective, because that's your life depend on it, or the life of your company depend on it, you are not going to understand the data the same way, and the asset will be returned to you. So this is where you have to be very careful in properly managing that return, because if a large pharma return an asset to you, it's usually not a very good news. But I have seen a company which disagreed, and they were in their absolute right to do so, and have been able to rescue their asset, but it was an uphill battle. So the communication on the return, the financial condition on the return, the data, if you are strong enough to define go-no-go criteria upfront, that will make your life much easier. Because the disagreement on the go-no-go is very often where the difference of opinion are appearing. And from time to time, even with that go-no-go criteria, the asset might be returned just because of a portfolio decision, which is then putting you in a very difficult spot, because that's all what you have. And this is where the best effort clause come into play.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up when the pharma, for whatever reason, will decide to return the asset. I wonder, once all of this process of returning it back to you is over, you as a biotech, it's like, what's next? And this is part of preparing for the breakup. I wonder if anyone has thoughts on kind of what's next.
Well, it depends of the causes of the return, I guess, right? If there is a clear signal that your product is not delivering what you thought it would, then you have to have backup plans. I mean, biotech is all about backups, right? It's all about understanding what you do if this doesn't work, if this doesn't work, if that doesn't work. But in my experience, most often it's not because of absolute data. It's about relative comprehension of the data, or seeing the data from different angles. Again, if you're at the beginning of a partnership, you say, okay, I'm going to run that program, and at the end of the phase 1, I'm going to have your perspective. I'm going to have a building block to go to phase 2, while your partner think at the end of phase 1, I have a product that I will go take to registration. Then this is where you end up in a very difficult situation, because they will return a product that, in your opinion, may have still a lot of potential, but it gets slapped in a way. So in this instance, I think you have to prepare for finding other partners that are understanding your strategy a bit more, and probably think about that early on.
And this might be a little bit idealistic, but I think it comes back to that relationship management thing, where if you're diligent about the effort there to really make them care about this across levels and push it forward, hope in a negative but positive way, hopefully the reason they're returning it is because it just failed, and you yourself would also move on, as opposed to being in the awkward position where it failed due to some, or they return it due to some portfolio decision, but you think it still has value, and now you have a uphill battle to explain to people like, no, they don't know what they're talking about, this is actually useful. And they're like, yes, sure, little biotech, you're going to live and die by this, I believe you. And so I think keeping that in mind throughout the relationship is important to make it have its maximum chance that they will put this through, and then if it fails, it's something that you don't want either, and at least it gives you the clarity to move on and not need to fight those uphill battles. But that's ideally if you can do that.
And to add to that, this is where you have to be extremely vigilant on the communication of that separation. I think what put in the release, when there are press release on that, is going to determine your likelihood of success of finding other parties. So be very vigilant and make sure that the wording is balanced, and it's impacting you more than it will impact the large partners. So it's something you should really drive.
And you can be, your investors and you are going to be very worried about being stigmatized, or that program being stigmatized, but there are definitely some case studies where it turned out to be a really good thing to have the program returned. The program was languishing, wasn't getting enough priority resources, and you get it back, and depending on the capital markets, you may or may not be able to take it forward yourself, but you partnered again. There's some wonderful, like Phoenix Rising stories that way. So.
Yeah, it might turn out that the partner that you initially went with does not end up being the best partner to take it forward with you.
Or they got out of the therapeutic area, and
yeah.
a lot of things that have nothing to do with you. So.
Okay, great. I know we've got probably about 10 minutes or so left, I actually slated this part for any other advice. I know we've been kind of sprinkling advice over the course of the whole panel. I started with prepare for the breakup. We've talked about relationship management a lot. I wonder, Armand we talked earlier a lot about kind of building trust and keeping it. I don't know if there's any kind of more comments you can make on that, how to build trust.
I think it's some of the basics really where you just got to personalize who they are and do it across levels and individuals. So build the relationship with the individuals. Know that you and your counterpart there can really trust each other and are in this together and have a shared vision for what this can be, and try to propagate that across your team and their team too, so that you're really in this together and it feels almost on a personal level that you're connected and mutually bought in. Because if it's this more amorphous two organizations kind of dealing with each other, it can become a lot less motivating for both sides to do a good job with it. So I think it's just, don't forget it's a person on the other side. As I said, sometimes this is actually the fun part of what they do, and keep that in mind, because that gives you something to build off of. They want to deal with you on these things, as you said. They want what you're doing, so just build on that and be vigilant. So I think it's just a lot of maintenance work and making a conscious effort to do that. That's probably most of it.
There is one component which is, I would say, a basic relationship, is the chemistry. And this starts immediately when they come to due diligence. So when a partner will come and due diligence on you, spending time looking at the chemistry of your team members with the partner team members will define your likelihood of having a good partnership. That's where the trust gets built, and more is the credibility and the respect. Keep in mind that when a company come and do due diligence on you, people focus very often on the data and the science and the finance, and we very often underestimate the chemistry. If in the due diligence you already see some bumps of people interaction, just be prepared that this bump will get exacerbated during the partnership. And either you change your people or they change their people to make it work at the end. The respect and the credibility, i.e., you know your data better than anyone else. You have more expertise very often than the partners who's coming to talk to you about your asset. And that's why the partner come to you, is because they are trying to fill a gap in their own portfolio. If you don't feel that that's recognized, accepted, if you are faced with an arrogant attitude, we know it better, the attitude of the picture and the check at the end of the year, then you probably want to sit back and reconsider. You may have a partner who will bring you maybe less money, but because the chemistry is good, because the interrelationship during the due diligence went better, you may want to consider that one, because in the long term, it will bring more value to you and to your asset.
I think you probably also have to look at the history of that partnerships. You know, what's his success or track record in having successful partnerships. I think that's also an important element. But I think it binds to the chemistry element, to the arrogance element sometimes of part. But frankly speaking, most of the people we talk to now, they're not there. I mean, we're past the time of big fights. We're the stronger. You're there. I think we're more. Most of the people we talk to for the moment are really in the collaborative approach. So and as long as the chemistry is right, as long as you set your objectives right from the beginning, there is no reason why it should go wrong, unless the product doesn't work, which is fine, unless the portfolio strategy changes, which is fine as well.
I think when you are about to close your first deal, when you're a new startup, keep in mind, I mean, talk to your own team and say, are we going to be able to under-promise and over-deliver, you know, for sure, before we sign this thing? Like, make your own team buy into it. And word gets around. I mean, the pharmas go to events and compare notes on this, especially on small companies, and whether there's an egomaniac running it that's hard to work with, or if they're all serious, sincere, you know, scientists and very collaborative. So don't underestimate that, I think.
Yeah, and Fouzia, when you were talking, you actually preempted a question that I was going to ask. You know, if a potential partnership, and we might have answered it already, but if a potential partnership, it has all the economics are right, the scientific fit is right, the interests are right, but you don't really think you might like working with them. Do you take the partnership?
The best way to have a partnership work is when the project works well. You know, it's like when research is easy and when sales go, I mean, there's no problem. It is when you get into the bumps. It is then when the partnership, you know, is put at the test. And then the personalities come up. But when things go well, life is splendid. So it's like, yeah.
So we went from talking about marriages to now prostituting ourselves and whether we're gonna, like go do whatever we have to do for the money. So the only caveat I'll throw out is we can't always be picky. Sometimes like our survival depends on doing a deal, and we don't just sit there saying, I don't know if this is a comfortable relationship.
Yeah, my advice is to do everything you can to actually avoid that. I've been there, and I wish I had done a better job of avoiding that. You know, I just look at the partnering as a tool, just like your equity financing, just like your development plan, how you're value building, and try to have it serve the interests, you know, of your ultimate goal in building your company, and not become an end in itself, or, you know, a fix for the fact that you know, you've had some stumbles and you've got to do something to keep your company alive. So.
Yeah, and I think what you're referring to is kind of if you can avoid it at all, don't come to a partnership as kind of a necessary next step. And so my next question is, but how do you avoid this?
I'm actually going to speak to that again, too. Definitely try to partner from a position of strength. Obviously, already be financed, have the next step financed if at all possible, have good data behind you, and it's a real signal that I think you're doing it at the right time if you have multiple people pursuing you with generous terms. Obviously, if the market's telling you that you've got a valuable asset, then that's probably better than if you're really having to run after people, you know, to get them interested. So obviously try to do it out of a position of strength.
All right. So we're running up against the end of our time here. So if anybody has any parting thoughts for the audience, I'll let you have the floor for the 1 minute that we have left.
Just don't want to leave you with all the challenges. There are a lot of very successful partnerships with big pharma and biotech. I mean, several of them. So I hope you will be added to the list of successful partnerships.
We love our big partner.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for a great discussion.